Okay, this is the beginning of a series that I'll be doing about Metal Gear. In case you don't like Metal Gear for my subscribers, I will be throwing in some other videos too on some other stuff, like an Uncharted 2 review coming up soon. But this will be a series about Metal Gear, so this will be what I'll be mainly working on for the next couple weeks. Alright, this video is going to be about pretty much Metal Gear before Metal Gear Solid 1. So the games here are Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2. The original Metal Gear. Now, the original Metal Gear, most people, and especially North America, know about Metal Gear because of the NES version of the game. In fact, most people thought it was exclusive to the NES, because that's all that was released in North America. But really, Metal Gear began on a little computer system in Japan, that never launched outside Japan, to my knowledge, called the MSX. Now, in case you didn't notice, MS, letters MS, is in MSX. And I'll get back to that at the end of the video. Because it's kind of ironic, because you'll see how it's ironic. I'll explain at the end of the video. But basically, the MSX was a little computer system in Japan that didn't have that many games. Not that many people had it. In fact, about the only thing it ever did worth knowing is it was the system that Metal Gear was first made on. That was about 20 years ago in Japan. In fact, I think it was 87, actually. It could have been 88. I think the NES was 88, MSX was 87. But either way, it originally launched as an exclusive game to the MSX. Eventually, it got really good reception. You know, Hideo Kojima had tried to make a game before that got kind of bad reception, and his coworkers all hated it. But then he made Metal Gear, and it was his first big game. So when it got good reception, he was like, oh my gosh, finally, my big chance. And the company felt the same way. They're like, okay, this guy's talent, but this game isn't selling that well. It's not making us that much money. And they pretty quickly realized that was because it was on the MSX. Now, the average viewer has probably not heard about the MSX before in their life. And that's one reason the game didn't sell too well. No one had the MSX. And like I said, about the only thing that the MSX ever accomplished was it was the system that Metal Gear launched on. The MSX looked a little bit like a Commodore 64. It was the same idea. It was basically a weird PC that would play games. So anyway, Konami, which is a company that Hideo Kojima worked for now and even back then, decided that the game would sell much better if they moved it to the way more popular NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, or the Famicom in Japan. So after they did that, of course the game sold much better, but people didn't like it on the NES because it got a really bad port. Now there's pretty much people that are still bad ports, but they're not nearly as common, and they're not nearly as bad as what happened with Metal Gear. Like, people say the Orange Box was a really bad port. It got ported from the 360 to the PS3, and people say that, you know, the company that did that did a really bad job. Which is partially true. They did do a bad job by today's standards. And Bayonetta, which is, of course, an incredibly recent release, also has a lot of the same complaints about a bad port. But Metal Gear had an atrocious port. They added in a whole section, which normally, you know, added content is normally a good thing. But in this case, it wasn't optional, you had to do it. It was pretty much, if you played the game, you know what I'm talking about. It was the jungle level at the beginning of the game. That was not in the original version made by Hideo Kojima. And Hideo Kojima had nothing to do with the port. So someone, I don't know who, decided to add in this jungle scene, which really kind of screwed up the game a little bit. And then there are lots of other things that kind of screwed up the game too. And then the first screen in the game, there's a guard who falls asleep. Then when he wakes up, instead of saying, I fell asleep, he says, I feel asleep. It's like, man. I mean, bad translations were common back then, but it's really annoying if you play the game. So basically, Metal Gear was the best rated game on the MSX, but it was a kind of bad NES game. In fact, some people like the Angry Video Game Nerd even made videos about it. Now, Hideo Kojima moved on to what he considered to be bigger ideas, better franchises. At the time, he felt that way. But somebody else made a Metal Gear game. I don't know who. But this time it was only on the NES. At least to my knowledge, it was only on the NES. It was called Metal Gear Snake's Revenge. But that game I'm not going to talk about that game very much because it didn't get that good of a reception, it didn't sell that well, it was not that important, and it was not made by Hideo Kojima. And a lot of people just don't consider it part of the franchise at all, or part of the series of games known as Metal Gear. So I'm just going to leave it out from here on. Then there was Metal Gear 2. Metal Gear 2 was only on the MSX2. This was another pretty good game. It just furthered the plot of Metal Gear. It didn't do anything that Metal Gear had done before, but what's important about it is that it made Metal Gear into a series, an official series, because Metal Gear Snake's Revenge doesn't count. So now you have Metal Gear, Hideo Kojima came back and did Metal Gear 2. So now the series is kind of known, especially in Japan it's pretty well known, and it's gotten some attention. So people are wondering what's coming next. And that, of course, is Metal Gear Solid 1. But I'll talk about that in the next video. To wrap this up, there are a couple weird things about Metal Gear, the first couple games. First of all, I have it written down here just so I can remember what systems all the games were for. And so we have Metal Gear 1, which was for the MSX and the NES later on. So it was the MSX and NES, alright? Then we have Snake's Revenge, which was only for the NES. Then we have Metal Gear 2, which is only for the MSX2. So it's not like Metal Gear Solid 1 through 4, where they're all pretty consistent about what console they're for. Here, it's like they're jumping all over the place to different systems. In fact, even going exclusive to one system, and then going exclusive to a competitor of that system. Maybe that was more common back then, but it still seems very weird. Also, like I said, the console that Metal Gear launched on was called the MSX. And it's just so ironic because it was actually a computer built by Microsoft. So in case that didn't fit together in your head, the original Metal Gear game was exclusive to a system made by Microsoft. So back then, Microsoft could probably have paid a couple $1,000s, and they could have kept Metal Gear as an exclusive all the way up through now, probably. But they didn't know what they had, and they let it go. And now it's come back to haunt them with Metal Gear Solid 4 being one of the best games for the PlayStation 3. Next video, I'll be talking about Metal Gear Solid 1. So see you about a week from now, and peace.